Well, good afternoon or morning or whenever you're watching this. We are glad that you're here. My name is Karen Andrews. I'm the Director of Worship and Communications at First United Methodist Church in Boerne. And I am glad that you're with us. I am so glad, particularly for those of you who have been with us for several weeks in a row now. This is our fourth week of trying this experiment, and we are ending our series on the Psalms, and I'm a little bit sad about that. But thank you so much for being with us, and if you're brand new this week, welcome. And I want to reintroduce to you Pastor LBalensiefen and Pastor Rmiller, who are two of our pastors here, and they're going to talk with us a little bit today about a particular kind of psalm in this study that we've been doing. So, like I said, I'm a little sad to move on from our discussion of the Psalms, but I have a personal project that I want to take on. You might as well, or not, but this has inspired me to make a concerted effort to go back and read the whole book of Psalms. And there's a lot of them, but they're in little chunks. So either over the next couple of weeks or maybe months, I kind of want to read through the whole book again. I have been inspired to do that. Maybe you have, maybe not, but feel free to join me in that. And if you do, and you have questions about it, feel free to send those in to us. It may inspire or bring up something in you. So, Lori preached again this morning, like she did last week, and we are talking about Psalms of Joy. Yay! Yes. Which is a huge contrast from last week's Psalms of Pain. Both important, but why was it important to you to include Psalms of Joy in this journey, and why did you pick Psalm 16, which is the one that was typical of that?
Well, we chose Psalms of Joy in with this series because we talked about Psalms of Faith, Psalms of Pain, Psalms of Restoration, Transformation, and then we added Psalms of Joy. And those four topics are kind of interrelated. Joy is rooted in our faith, and it's grown in seasons of pain and the transformation that happens during those seasons of our life. And so they kind of form a pathway to how we grow and develop in our own faith.
Okay. So, as always, I would encourage you to go and read the actual psalm. We've included a link to it. So read all of Psalm 16, but we focused on a few verses. Can either one of you, I know you can because you preached on it, but you also get a chance here, draw the distinction for us between happiness and joy? Because we often think of them as the same thing, but they're really not. Who wants to go first?
Well, I'll go since I had them prepared in my sermon earlier. So happiness and joy are both feelings, they're emotions. Happiness comes from circumstances in our lives. We are happy when we make new friends. We're happy if we do well on a test in school. We're happy if we have some sort of achievement in our lives. But all of those are tied to circumstances in our lives. Joy is a little bit different, in that joy is a gift from God. It's not something that we can create for ourselves. It's something that has to come from God, and God provides it for us. We have to be open to seeing it and receiving it. But joy is more about having this deep-seated understanding that no matter what happens in life, that everything's going to be okay. God is with me. God will take care of me. God will provide for me. And so joy is a much deeper emotion and one that comes from God and not from us.
I think another way to think about it is that joy is a 30,000-foot view of life. Happiness is based on what's happening right here, right now. It's this kind of view. But joy is that overall view that says, oh, life is good. Life has got beauty and wonder and awesomeness in it, even though there are momentary times of pain for sure. But maybe that's just another way to think of the difference between those two things.
Yeah, that zoom out,
Yeah.
joy, zoom
Yeah.
in.
You said it's deeper, I said it's higher.
Deep and wide. You had a quote this morning that I'd love if you wouldn't mind reading for us directly. All three of us are big Richard Rohr fans. And so I wanted Russell to kind of tell you a little bit more about who he is, and I may link to something else about him in the notes if you're interested. When you hear the quote, you may be, because it's just profoundly beautiful. But Russell, would you tell us a little bit about who that is?
Yeah, Richard Rohr is maybe one of the most important contemporary voices in theological discussions, I would say. He is an ordained Catholic priest. He's a Franciscan friar. And he has opened something called the Center for Action and Contemplation in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And really is helping people see and understand in new ways the value of some of the old practices like contemplation, but how it has to be tied to the things that we do, that you can't just be contemplative and never act, and you can't act and never think about what you're doing. So he really does a great job of tying those two together. He's written lots of books, and he's just prolific and profound. So, and certainly what you quoted today is typical of that.
Richard Rohr has this insightful way of taking things and expressing them in a way that you go, wow.
Yeah.
I've never thought of it like that before. And I love his work.
Yeah, we're big fans.
So here's the quote that we've been referring to that refers to joy. Joy is both a decision and a surrender. Eventually, we stop being preoccupied with creating a fault-free environment that will ensure our own happiness. And we discover that joy is much more like falling into an objective presence, a larger body, love itself, a unified field that many of us would call God. You do not create love, you fall into it. You do not attain God, you fall into God. You do not manufacture joy, you collapse into it when you give up trying to make it happen. What freedom when we no longer have to wait for ourselves to be happy. There's no waiting, only receiving.
I just love that. I would love to stop waiting on myself to be happy. That would be really great. So I want to ask you both then, the follow-up to that is, and I feel like it's such a simple question, how do we fall into joy? I say it's simple because there was like 5 paragraphs in the rest of the sermon. It's not simple. But you want to take a shot?
Well, it has a simple answer.
Yeah.
With a very complex process. Simply put, falling into joy involves really just recognizing God's presence in our life and understanding that God is with us, God is for us, God is going to take care of us no matter what. I really almost translate joy into this deep abiding trust in God. And so falling into joy is that recognition and trusting that God's got me, I'm okay. That's the simple answer. The process of how that happens can be very complex because it involves us, and we're human beings, and we don't do anything simply and easily. So.
I love that analogy he makes. It's like falling in love. You know, you can't make yourself fall in love. You can't make that happen any sooner than it's going to anyway. You just have to let it go, and when it happens, and it's right. And joy can be like that. You can't make it happen. You just have to relax into the fact that it's all going to be okay, and boom, joy will come at an unexpected moment. And
I want to come back to the process because you kind of outlined some specific, possibly actionable steps, and we may come back to that. But both of you have mentioned this, it's all going to be okay. And just for this audience in particular, you know, God's with me, God's for me, and it's all going to be okay. What does that look like?
For me, it's about recognizing that, and through my own life experiences, it really is going to be okay. There was a time in our lives when we had young kids at home, and it was right before Christmas, and my husband calls me and says, I was laid off today. And he was our sole provider. And I panicked. I freaked out. That was not a happy time. But some of the things I learned through that was it really was going to be okay. Did we eat filet mignon for a while? No, we didn't. Did we depend on the kindness of others in that time? Yes, we did. It wasn't always pretty. God didn't provide what we wanted, but God provided for our needs. None of us starved. My husband eventually, after 3 or 4 months, was able to find another job. And so, for me, it's going to be okay. Another instance is, many of the folks at our church know the story of our daughter, and she had a terminal illness and she died when she was 9. That was not a happy time by any means. And I really had to wrestle with my faith. It's not like I just went to it and go, everything's going to be okay. God's
feel
with
joy.
me. Yes.
Yeah, no.
That was a long process. But it's all okay. My daughter's suffering ended. She is healed and whole, spending time with God in a way she never could be here. And we have grieved, and it broke our hearts, and we always, I think, will carry a little bit of grief with us. But we are okay, and we are living our lives. And so I have learned through my life experiences thus far, and I'm sure I have more to learn as we go. It's not going to look like what I want it to or what I expect it to, but it's going to be okay. I don't know how any other way to say that.
Yeah, well, and that's you just summed up why we did the pain, transformation, joy journey.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this won't sound nearly as deep as
Lighten the mood,
yeah.
Russell.
Well, I do love Julian of Norwich.
Oh, yes.
One of the saints of the church from medieval times who lived in a little cell attached to a church, and so that was her entire world, was that little cell. But she could open the window on one side and worship as Mass was going on. It was Catholic, of course. And then on the other side, her window opened out to the street, and she could visit with people, and she could give advice and spiritual counseling. And it was a time that was just awful in human history. I mean, there was plague, and there was all kinds of terrible stuff going on. And yet her most famous quote is, "All shall be well, and all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well," and so she just was able to step back and say, this is bad, this is bad, this is bad, but all is well because God still is God. And that's where joy comes from. And if that's too outdated for you, go with John Lennon, who said that everything will be okay in the end. So if everything's not okay, this isn't the end.
Yeah. Perfect. So I always get, and this will take us back to that process question. So it's now predictable. I tend to end with this question of, so what, right? What do I need to change in me? What do I need to change in the world? Or what is changed in me? Or what is changed in the world because of what we've heard? So what does that look like in this case?
Well, part of that process of falling into joy is work that happens within us. To be able to take time to understand that God is with us, God's presence is with us. And there's a lot of great spiritual practices that help with that. Daily examine or daily inventory, keeping a gratitude journal. Those are all ways to remind ourselves of, God has been with me today, and these are the ways he's been at work in my life. So those are helpful. For other people that are more contemplative, there's contemplative prayer, worship services, just any way that we can connect ourselves with God's presence and God's work in our lives. Because the more we're aware of that, the more we begin to think, oh, well, God was at work here, and see how God provided for me in the midst of this. And that helps build our faith, it helps build our trust, and that breathes joy into us. And so, and again, simple words, easy to say, living it out is a process and takes time. Like Russell said, it happens at unexpected moments. But we can help facilitate that by keeping ourselves open to where God is.
Well, thank you guys again for being here. Again, I'm so sad that this Psalm series is over, and we called it the Summer Psalm Series, and I'm going to push to make it an every summer thing, but we'll see what happens. It's a whole year from now till next summer. But share with us your comments, as always. If you have something joyful that you want to share, we'd love to hear that, either in the comments of this video, or as always, you can go to the church Facebook page and there's a link and find our email addresses. I may even put our email addresses directly on this, so you can reach out to us, comment, questions. We may have a future episode that's a mailbag where we actually take on those questions, so send them. Can't promise we'll get to them, but we'd love to hear from you. So links for the Facebook page, the website, the YouTube channel, all that will be there for you. And next week, we have a new voice entering the conversation, not new to any of us, but new to you. Our senior pastor, Ricky Burke, will be back, and we'll be starting working on another series and talking about something different. So I hope you will join us, and either Lori or Russell will be here, and they'll be in and out, and maybe I'll take a week off and let that one of them take it. So we will see you next week. Who would like to close us? Lori, would you pray for us today?
Absolutely. Gracious, loving, and joyful God, we give you thanks for your presence in our lives. Guide us. Help us to open our eyes to the gifts you have before us, and that we can trust that at the end of the day, no matter what happens, that all will be well with you. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much. We'll see you next week. Bye.